let's talk about the news, huh?
Yeah. What do you got there?
All right, so it looks like let's go down here. Yeah, so we had let's see, hang on one second here. Okay, so the Carmel airdrops began today. Carmel, we interviewed them on episode one, the inaugural episode of EOS Radio, and Dan Kalinescu was nice enough to come on, and he was phenomenal. I really enjoyed talking to him. And you even mentioned Carmel earlier today. They are an education DApp where basically an employer can go in and, well, you go ahead and describe it, Blue Jays. You're the best at describing Carmel.
Yeah, I mean, so Carmel to me is like a place that you would go to learn about something, except this is going to be tokenized, and there's going to be that economy driving motivations to learn, and also for challengers to issue challenges to people. So go check out Carmel.io for a lot more information of it. I know Dan Kalinescu, that is updating his white paper um, on these specific topics as well too. So it's a great project. And when earlier on, I thought of EOS Scholar, which the EOS Nation guys talked about, uh, could be like a challenge on there. Basically, start up a test net. That could be a challenge, right? Maybe we can put a bounty on, not a bounty. There's some kind of challenge economics there. You put a prize for if you get that, and then so forth. It's an interesting concept. So yeah, he's got an airdrop going on right now, and find out more in the Carmel channel on Telegram, and also at Carmel.io.
Yes, and also, so the airdrop itself is going on through May 7th, I believe it said. May 7th, yep. Visit airdropsforeos.com. That is a third-party site, but also on Carmel, you can go to get tokens. You go to carmel.io/tokens, and there's a countdown timer, and you can claim your free tokens on there. So you get up to 350 Carmel tokens for free. That's an airdrop, everybody's favorite word. We talked about it at the beginning of the show. So rush over there. Don't crash the site, please. We know there are thousands of people watching right now, so please go over to carmel.io/airdrops and claim some free tokens and take part in the ecosystem when it is up and running. Do you remember what Dan talked about with when Carmel will be usable? I know he's talking about, he's kind of taking that same hybrid model that we mentioned earlier about how you can't necessarily put every bit of information on the blockchain just yet. You'll need to have some hybrid of information on a cloud server, and then also you can sort of use the blockchain to record hashes of the data. So when do you think Carmel will be usable? When is that going to come out?
From what I know, Carmel is taking the approach of making it as usable as possible, and making that transparent to users whether or not they're on the blockchain or not. So whenever EOS is ready, they will be using EOS. I think that's what Dan would say.
Yeah, I agree. And so let's move forward as well. Let's see here. So the Everpedia has released its first draft of the white paper. And the white paper, I haven't actually gone through it yet. I just know that they released it a few days ago. It's been a long awaited. In fact, someone earlier in the chat had a question about venture capital funding for Thomas. And Thomas doesn't know much about venture capital funding, but I could actually help answer that because Mabood from Everpedia, he's one of the co-founders. He was on here a couple episodes ago. And he talked about how when they were funded, basically the venture capitalists bought all of the tokens for the $30 million that they were funded, bought every single one of the tokens and said, here, you have to airdrop all these on the EOS distribution list. So that's how that worked. And when it comes to their white paper, it just describes more about how the token might work. Mabood described it more as a governing token, where if you have a lot of these Everpedia IQ tokens, you can help govern the platform itself. What are your thoughts, Blue Jays, on the Everpedia white paper?
I didn't get a chance to look at it. Although the interview, I would encourage everyone to go back to the Mabode interview that we did a few weeks back. Everpedia is just going to be one of those amazing projects. It's sort of built for the blockchain. You want to have data, you want to have information persist and auditable. And something like having Everpedia on EOS is just a match made in sort of blockchain heaven. So
Blockchain heaven, huh? Will there be blockchain trashmen up in blockchain heaven?
no, I don't know. I did not bring up the golden goose.
Thank you. Yeah, we probably should avoid that topic. I mean, that was Eleanor Ostrom governing the Commons, which we talked about back in January when we went up to Blacksburg and we talked to Thomas, had a sit down interview. He was into governing the Commons at the time because he was trying to form that part of the Constitution. He was working on that part. And so we made a couple of jokes about governing, about the golden goose and how you don't want to stress the golden goose too much. And otherwise, it will stop laying eggs and you will lose. In the long run, you lose out on the number of golden eggs you could have gained from your golden goose.
I believe Thomas started making jokes though in this call, so
we
rubbed off on him.
Perfect. I'm glad that we have an effect on Thomas. Let's talk about. So Dan has talked a lot about Dawn 3.0 in the Telegram chat these last few days. The Dan chat only messaging bot has been going wild, and a lot of folks have been reposting them all over the place on Reddit and elsewhere. So he's been talking about how it'll be mostly feature complete. Dawn 3.0 is supposed to come out April 6th. That's pretty much a confirmed date at this point, which should be this coming Thursday, I believe. It's also the same, no, it's this coming Friday, excuse me. It's also the same day that Hong Kong is holding their humongous meetup, which will have Josh Lavin will be speaking, as well as Ian Grigg speaking as well in Hong Kong. So that's going to be a big day. And what are your thoughts on Dawn 3.0, Blue Jays?
I'm very excited for this release candidate one. As Dan said in the Telegram, they want to get this out there as feature complete as possible, and basically doing bug fixes for the next couple months. So this is the release candidate. This is the big one, and I think this Hong Kong meetup too is just going to have some interesting news come out of that. I believe Thomas did allude to some governance decisions later on this week or next week. I think that may coincide with the Hong Kong meetup or justly right after. So it's going to be an exciting week.
Yeah, I agree. We do have a great week coming up. We'll have a lot to talk about next week, that's for sure. Also, when we go back to, that was just your own personal opinion about the meetup and releasing details of the governance and whatnot. Of course, we'll issue that disclaimer ourselves. We don't want to set expectations too high when it comes to that. However, I mean, people have been speculating all about the different speakers, possibly someone, more than just Ian Grigg or so on, maybe Brendan, but that's just more speculation, of course. We don't want to go too far into that. Also, Dan said an interesting thing about the Genesis part. Let's see if I can find it here. I'm looking through his Dan message only Telegram messages, and he said something about the Genesis. It's now possible to start a working test blockchain with a single command and no config file /Genesis editing. That's pretty cool. And there's been a lot of changes already that folks have noticed in Dawn 3.0 that should be interesting. So yeah, we'll talk more about this next week for sure. No question about that.
Do you think, Kev, that the graphics will change? You noticed when we went from Dawn and then we had another release, all the graphics changed. I'm looking forward to the graphics change.
Yeah, you're talking about the EOS.io website.
Yeah,
absolutely. These are the important questions. I mean, folks, come on. Dawn 3.0. So we already have, I believe, first it was pretty dark, Dawn 1.0, and now we have the everything's lit up pretty well. What are we going to have now? Blazing sunshine. There'll be maybe some children playing on the beach, maybe a dog running around, a cute waterfall. I mean, maybe the sun has a smiley face on it as well. He's just going to be beautiful.
EOS is going to have a tan, that's for sure.
EOS will have a tan. We'll see how that chestahedron looks after this.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm glad you're asking these questions, Blue Jays.
Yeah.
And
I'm here to cover the hot topics.
The hot topics. I mean, do you think Dawn 3.0 will it kind of ignite the interest from developers? From when we look at Ethereum developers and even EOS Nation talked about there are some projects that may be coming over. We don't personally know about those yet, but do you think that will ignite more interest from those projects to come over to EOS?
Absolutely. A release candidate is a big deal, so the code is probably not going to change much. More bug fixes and probably minor features, maybe some medium features, but from a broad perspective, you can pretty much depend on that code to be what it's going to be like during when it's available. The final release candidate is available, so I think it is exciting from a developer point of view.
Sure, yeah. And if folks who are not familiar with Blue Jays, you're a software engineer in your real life, and so you have a lot of familiarity with release candidates and what might be expected. So thank you for that kind of deeper look, more so than just the website pretty pictures part. That everything's important, though. Let's be honest.
We're gonna get that tan.
Let's see here. Let's move forward. We're going to talk about Dan and Vitalik going back and forth about DeepPOS. It was actually fairly friendly. I mean, and Thomas put it really well it's too easy for us to sit back here and laugh sometimes about Ethereum and make fun of how hard it is to use and how few features are actually usable for grandmas and even for developers. However, we are standing on the shoulders of giants, to quote him, and this is a phenomenal project. And when Vitalik speaks or when he writes something in his blog, we should respect that more than anything else. So he was talking about concerns with DPoS, which frankly, a lot of us share the same concerns, right? We talk about vote buying all the time, and he just brought them up more publicly. And then Dan responded as well, and then Vitalik responded on top of that. So Bluejays, give us a summary. What are your thoughts there?
I saw the article, and my initial instinct was I want to know what the community thinks about this. So our account tweeted it out, and we got a lot of feedback and responses, and a lot of people within our community, like I talked about earlier, the hot topics get out there, we get feedback from our community, and then our community adapts, and new decisions are made, and that churn is just very healthy. So hearing a contrasting opinion is nothing but healthy for us, as long as we adapt and we take it the right way.
I agree completely. That was well said. And Dan, the differences between the two arguments is, it seems, to summarize, it looks like Dan he believes more in the power of the human good. He says that he assumes that the majority of people have good intentions and that you cannot prove a negative, and there is no such thing as a closed economic system. Those are the three incontrovertible premises that he bases his work upon. Vitalik is more code first, right? He just expects that we need to eliminate as many human issues as possible, as many as we can through the code itself. And of course, governance on the blockchain will be new with EOS, as Thomas has mentioned as well. So this will be an entirely new experiment. It's possible we could do this and it could work out very poorly. We don't know. I mean, we're just assuming that arbitration will be smooth and that we can arbitrate those bad arbitrators, and we can amend the Constitution should we need to. We can fork, do this and that. We don't actually know yet, right? So maybe there's another project in a few years that's laughing at us. Who knows? So,
and as someone else mentioned, not only the points that you have, but the wide distribution. It's just something that I would say other projects may not be as strong in, given the year-long ICO, as Yves LaRose mentioned earlier on as well.
Sure. Yeah. And Dan did a good job he always loves to put in, I call them Dan-analogies, where he tries to explain something very complicated by making a real world relation. And he talked about radio stations. In his response to Vitalik, he related blockchain to a radio station where proof of work, you basically, when you have proof of work system, you're relying on the loudest possible transmitter, and they're the ones with the most money can broadcast over anybody else, basically saying that they win the block, right? Proof of stake system is the same thing. If you have a large amount of stake, you can broadcast over everybody else. Whereas delegated proof of stake gives everybody the power to vote for who controls that transmitter, talking about the radio station still. So therefore, even the little guys have a little more power, especially if they're not happy with one of the block producers. They can band together, they can start a campaign, and they can try to get that block producer moved out.
Yep.
If the block producer is not performing. So he basically put forth an argument that did talk about how intentions of most folks are good, and he was trying to refute Vitalik in that way.
Yeah, we encourage everyone who is interested to read those two articles, and they're on Medium underneath I believe, did Dan publish it under EOS.io?
He did it on his own Medium blog.
Oh, he did it on his own Medium blog. Okay.
Yeah, he posts everything on his own Medium blog nowadays. He doesn't post on Steam anymore, as most folks know. So, and also the EOS.io, I'm sure the Medium blog on there probably re-mediumed it, whatever you want to call that. So it looks like they did not. So you'll have to go to, it is medium.com/@Bytemaster, which is his name for most of this, his GitHub name as well.
Is it Bytemaster7 or Bytemaster?
Just Bytemaster. It's BYTE Master. There's no numbers on the end there. So if you want to read that. And Vitalik also submitted another response on Vitalik's own Medium account afterwards, and he was very friendly, and he even mentioned that DPoS could possibly be a secondary chain for Ethereum implemented with Plasma and so on and so forth.
Interesting.
However, yeah, it was an incredible, just reading from these two guys, I mean, these incredible geniuses talking back and forth, and we get to sit here and see the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
And read into it and try to understand as much as we can from our limited abilities and from what little we know about blockchain. Everything in this whole space is brand new, so how can we know? It's just incredible learning from folks who we believe someday will be up there with Steve Jobs and all these amazing names.
Things are progressing at a crazy clip, and these guys are on the forefront of it.
Always. Absolutely. Let's go on to the next topic here. I believe this is the last one. This was the proposal. And as Thomas just confirmed, it actually is not set in stone, but we're talking about the 1% cap on block producer payout. And so Thomas mentioned this in the block producers chat a few days ago. I believe it was last Wednesday or so. It was a little while ago. And he sort of said it offhandedly. And then folks they responded, and he said, yeah, well, Dan is very serious about putting this cap on there. The idea for the cap, whether the number is 1% or more, because Thomas talked about how it could be an umbrella, we could be a little higher, it could be variable, who knows yet, right? But the idea is we don't want block producers being extremely lucrative. We want them just doing their job. We don't necessarily, I guess the point is they don't really want the block producer to be acting kind of as a venture capitalist in the EOS ecosystem, which we had assumed before, right? Where if block producers are making 3% of the inflation and the EOS token is worth $50 per token, block producers will have a lot of extra money that they don't need to spend on infrastructure, and they could then put back into the ecosystem in whatever way they see fit. However, it sounds like they're trying to sort of put a cap, and Dan, in one message from Thomas, he talked about how Dan aims for a 100% profit model, roughly. And of course, whether it's a cap or whether it's just sort of a suggested way that the community could work towards, he just sees being a cap on the absolute profit that folks can make. So what are your thoughts there, Blue Jays?
I echo Thomas's sentiment about not making it so lucrative that it's going to be gamed. And I think that was his concern, and that would probably be my personal concern as well too. If it's too lucrative that it's just hard for people to not abuse it, for example. So that was
Sure.
that was my concern.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, there actually were a fair number of folks who said that as well, who said that, well, we're kind of glad to see that maybe block producers won't have so much power, because they already will have a fair amount in terms of they are one of the three heads of power, so-called, in the EOS ecosystem. When we talk about three heads of power, we're mentioning, think about it from the U.S. Government way, where you have the executive, the judicial, and the legislative branches. Well, in EOS, it sounds like it's going to be the community, the arbitrators, and the block producers will be the three heads of power. And we don't know yet. Of course, the Constitution still has yet to come out, so we don't know how those will interact, who will have power over the other, and so on and so forth. However, block producers having that power and then also being extremely wealthy, that could be a potential issue. And so we did hear some community members who were kind of happy that more money will be thrown in. However, we should talk about the worker proposals themselves. We mentioned this with Thomas as well, but 4% of the inflation, it sounds like, could be allocated towards worker proposals. That's a lot of money, assuming the EOS token is worth a fair amount, possibly. How do we do oversight, right? I mean, who is elected to be the watchdog of these worker proposals, so that we don't just have some kind of ICO Wild West type situation like we already have on Ethereum, right? You have all these random dApp projects that claim they can do this and that, and then they take the money and they just disappear, or they run, or whatever. What are your thoughts there?
Worker proposals will have to be managed like a business, and all the controls around that, I believe, making sure you get a return on investment, and making sure that workers provide the services that the blockchain needs, and also they will get rated, and we should have also a way of administering them fairly as well too. So all things that we will as a community will have to work out. Anything that is going to be have a lot of tokens or resources behind it will have to have that sort of oversight, and you're absolutely right about that. So that's something I think that will be developed. I'm not sure if it's part of the actual software. So I mean, it's not like it's brand new. There's worker proposals in BitShares and also in Steam. So we definitely have a model to look at, and what's worked there, and what can be improved.
Sure, absolutely. And let's go forward to Meetups, because as we know with news and with the worker proposals, there's a lot to be seen yet. And actually, worker proposals are not due to come out until closer to the end of the year, possibly. So we don't know yet how that's all going to work out. But Meetups. So I just realized, so Eugene from EOS Salt Lake, EOS SLP, I believe it is, he is a block producer candidate. He's actually been maintaining a wonderful list of meetups on our forums in the meetup section, and there are a lot of them coming up. You heard a few earlier from EOS Nation themselves. They're hosting a bunch, and they're mostly there's a couple in Canada. Of course, they have that marathon with Thomas Cox. We should have mentioned that with him. That guy, wow, I mean, he is all over the place. And when I look at these meetups here, it's more Thomas Cox everywhere. So we have EOS Dallas. They have a meetup coming on April 18th. And it looks like Thomas Cox, EOS blockchain governance expert, will be either there or over video conference. It does not specify, but he is all over the place. EOS Atlanta is coming up this Thursday. And guess who's going to be there? Thomas Cox. Yep, blockchain governance expert. And then we're looking at EOS Moscow. That's in Russia, of course. April 11th, Wednesday, April 11th, they have a meetup. And over a video conference, they're going to have a special guest. Guess who?
Thomas Cox?
Thomas Cox. You got it. Yeah. EOS Stockholm has the meetup on the same day. That's Wednesday, April 11th. EOS Stockholm, this is a meetup that we've talked about for a little bit now. Vahid is actually the organizer, but I believe that Eric is also helping out with that. Eric is the block producer candidate from eosio.se. I think name's still subject to change, far as I've last heard. But anyway, so if you're interested in going to Stockholm, April 11th, they have a meetup there. And then also we have Nottingham. It looks like EOS Nottingham. They don't have a specific date set up quite yet, but they are having a meetup soon.
And just, we mentioned it before, but there's obviously a big one. I believe EOS Block 1 is actually going to be there. So that's going to be the Hong Kong meetup on April 6th.
And guess who will not be at that one? Thomas Cox. It'll be Ian Gregg and Josh Slavin will be there, and maybe Thomas Cox will be watching on live video stream. I think I've heard rumors of there being a YouTube stream, but I have not actually been able to find out where that is.
Okay.
So we'll see what that turns out to be. EOS Detroit has Thomas Cox on May 17th as well. So basically, if you'd like to hear more of Thomas or see more of Thomas, you probably can somewhere in the world.
Yep. And after that Detroit one, he's heading up to Toronto. Just to reiterate, the Toronto, he'll be in Waterloo on the 17th or 18th, and then Toronto on the 18th, and then on the 19th he'll be just north of Toronto as well too. So keep up with those on the eos-toronto.com website.
Sure thing. Yeah, and so we're going to wrap this up, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Blue Jays, let's talk about thoughts of the week. What are you excited about?
I'm excited about this April 6th, so probably Thursday for us here on the East Coast of the U.S., but I'm excited about that. I'm going to be looking forward to seeing what is talked about and what is... I'm not going to build it up anymore, Kev, because you know it's my personal sort of guess of speculation of what's going to be announced. So.
Right, and that's all we can do for a lot of things, but it is exciting, of course. Dawn 3.0, this is the final release candidate. That'll be very exciting. I'm looking forward to it too. I mean, let's face it, that's what we're all looking forward to, learning more about what dApps are possible and what kind of improvements are made and everything else. So that's the main thought of the week, I would say. We should also mention next week we have a few great guests coming up. Eric Hoel is coming back. A lot of folks enjoyed hearing from Eric, and he is brilliant. He's based in New York City. He is not developing a dApp, but he is a Forbes 30 under 30 upcoming scientist. He is a neuroscientist based in New York City, and he works for, I believe it's NYU, doing neuro research. So he's going to talk about EOS, his thoughts for the future. He'll talk about Dawn 3.0. What else do we have coming up there, Blue Jays, that you know?
I believe EOS New York will be with us next week.
Oh, yes. So we'll have 2 representatives there from New York. Yep. And Shintai will be coming on as well. Shintai is an upcoming dApp, and it's community-based. So Shintai is a token rental dApp, and that's probably the dApp that people ask you about most. They say, how can I make money off my tokens? I know I cannot make money by voting for block producers. This is not a typical DPoS chain. How can I do it? And so the answer is probably going to be you can rent your bandwidth to developers who need it, or developers who think they may need it if they have a surge coming up, right? And so you'll be able to stake your tokens into the Shintai dApp, and then hopefully that will be rented out to a dApp developer who needs it. So you're actually helping the ecosystem while also hopefully making a little extra money on the side. We'll hear more about how all that works next week with David P. and also David Callan, I believe, will be on as well to describe that system.
Exciting project, definitely.
Great project.
And I believe Block One on a previous call has said that they will not be. And I could be totally wrong here, but did they say that they're not going to be shipping a token leasing platform uh, on release day?
Right. They will not. And
Okay.
actually, they won't be shipping any dApps, it sounds like, on release day, but they have confirmed with Shintai, I believe, that they are not shipping any kind of token rental leasing dApp.
Okay.
They're more focused on other projects. So it is perfect. It's great that there's a community effort stepping forward. The white paper is already out, and you can read that if you'd like. There's also a Telegram channel for Shintai. If you'd like to start familiarizing yourself before next week so you can understand what these guys are talking about, some of it's a little complicated, so we'll all be learning on the call next week on the show.
Awesome.
Oh,
I'm looking
yeah.
forward to this week.
And anyone who's looking to keep up with us, of course, you can find our community Telegram updates channel. A lot of folks know about that, and our Twitter. And if you'd like to stay up to date to when our videos come on or when our show comes on, you can always subscribe on YouTube and so on and so forth. So we'll keep that short. EOS Go, we're neutral as always. We love being here and doing this show every week. We'll see you next Monday.
See you next Monday, guys. Go EOS.
Go EOS.